Hello, and welcome to episode 28 of Modern Media Review, the podcast that reviews the media and approaches every day philosophically, at least like a 2p Goliath, and ends up with one winning leg.
Well, just for those the uninitiated, Robin, I know what a Goliath is, but specifically to this, what is a Goliath?
It's just a very complicated bet with like loads of horses in it. I think it's about 236.
I think it's 8, isn't it?
8, yeah, but you can never win it. You can maybe, and if you got 7 up, you'd be disappointed, wouldn't you?
You'd be gutted.
It's always the same with betting, isn't it? Even when you win, you think you should have had more on, and that's what we're going to talk about this week. After we've said, I'm Robin Gibson,
and I'm Sean Gollogly.
Yeah, sorry about that. Can You Beat The Bookies?
Was the name of the programme.
Much talked about show that was on BBC Three and iPlayer and was promoted to BBC One just the other day. Classic modern media review material with initial optimism about beating the bookies, tempered by not beating the bookies and then eventually finding out that you're probably going to get burned in the end. And we should know we've tried to beat the bookies often enough, haven't we, Sean?
On a regular basis, almost daily, Robin.
Yeah, but I've never done better than when we had the betting queue and Mr. Blobby being number one. Which was a foregone conclusion that we couldn't lose, so therefore we were being professional.
That's right.
A long time ago, though, now.
Pity about losing the house, though, eh?
Yeah, that's the problem with betting, isn't it? This show was introduced by a guy called Lloyd Griffith, a comedian who, unlike a lot of these brackets comedian type people, was actually very funny, wasn't he?
He was very funny. A very warm character. He was brilliant. And what I hadn't realised until I saw him again was that obviously he's on Soccer AM and he was in the Ladbrokes ad as, funny enough, a complete mirror of his own character as the gut truster.
The mug punter. The one that Ladbrokes want.
Everyone to be like.
The one who trusts his gut.
Yeah. And in fairness, I would trust his gut because it was quite impressive, his gut.
It was, yeah, well, it seems to go with the territory for comedians, that, doesn't it? Anyway, we don't want to get onto body fascism when we're talking about how to beat the bookies. Lloyd decided to go and have a chat to some punters, didn't he, outside the pub, and pretty much what you'd expect.
Yeah.
People with very little. It reminded me of that old Private Eye cartoon with the guy throwing away his betting slip and saying, there you go, another loser and nothing to blame but my own bad judgment. Well, these people didn't even seem to be using any judgment, did they? You got one lass who'd won over $3,500 for a pound accumulator, and then someone else who'd blown all his university money on it, and someone else who'd end up with Gamblers Anonymous when they were about 12 by the sound of things.
Well, gambling with bookies or online or what have you is no different to any get-rich-quick scheme that we've always followed through the annals of history. It's the feeling of getting something for nothing, isn't it? And it's quite hard, as it turns out.
It's hard to get something for nothing, although for a quid. He had a go at a few daft things before he got serious, didn't he? And he was trying one of those cuddly toy grabber machines at the Seaside Arcade. I once won a toy in one of those grabber machines. First go for a quid.
No way. What did you get?
Yeah, a Rasta mouse it was. I was very pleased with that. I picked it out specially from among the Pokemons, you know.
And have you still got the Rasta mouse?
Nah, it got lost in a move somewhere. But anyway, so Lloyd starts off with $7,500 of taxpayers' money, a few people pointed out. Licence fee payers' money, a few people pointed out.
Yeah, well, what you need apropos of that is a lot of people saying, I don't pay my licence fee for him to go and spend it in bookmakers.
Yeah, I do think the show itself probably costs a bit more than $7,500. Drop in the ocean. And he starts trying a few daft bets, and he starts getting agitated and sweaty in the way that a lot of unhabitual gamblers do.
It's very exciting. There is, like any, I was going to say drug, but like anything, you get a rush. There's an adrenaline rush with the prospect of your horse running well or your football team doing well and the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Very quickly, though, he ended up with no pot of gold, didn't he? He ended up having bets on stuff he didn't even know. I think it was Korean volleyball. He didn't even know what it was he was betting on.
Well, I bet on Atletico Mineiro about 3:30 in the morning once.
I've never heard of them.
Well, they're in Brazil.
Okay.
And, I mean, the bet won, but that was pure luck.
Pure luck. Yeah, so he decided, didn't he, not to be... He sort of decided to call the professionals in, didn't he, and not play by luck. But his first attempt at it was, what a nightmare. You know, I felt for this guy, Jordan, who was a professional greyhound punter.
Yeah.
You know, I've been involved with greyhounds before in a professional way, and
Me too.
well, not professional way.
Well, owning.
In an owning and unprofessional betting way. This guy, you know, I mean, I understand how difficult the dogs are, but unfortunately, the day that he decided to take Lloyd to the track, he couldn't back a winner.
He had a nightmare. He couldn't have caught a cold.
But it's hard betting on the dogs. It's quite funny because he just gave up, didn't he? He sort of took one night at it and he thought, well, this isn't for me. Not much fun, he said, and the sort of sad funereal music came in. And the thing is, at this point I was thinking, like, actually the dog guy gave him a winning horse tip, funnily enough, one of those in-the-know things that was odds on. I thought, at any point in this programme did anyone explain betting percentages?
No.
The single most important thing, like, if you've got a 2-to-1 shot, it means it's got a 33% chance of winning, right? And the only way to decide if you're going to make it pay is to say, well, actually, I think that horse has got a 50% chance of winning, so I'm going to back it. No, never explained any of that, was it?
Well,
and I'm no expert.
Which might have been just boring, because what you're trying to do is tap into this feeling that we have in the country, is that there seem to be a lot of people gambling, and are they just splurging their money, rather than going into the details of it.
Well, it's the same thing we were talking about the other day about new cars not having spare wheels in them, because no one can be bothered to learn how to change a wheel, can they? No. They'd rather just sit there for 2 hours waiting for the AA to come and pump their tyre up.
Or put a gallon of petrol in the tank.
Exactly. It's apparently the most common cause of breakdown assistance call-outs, running out of petrol. The point is, people just want the easy way, don't they? So he decides that, well, he gives up on the greyhounds. I mean, that guy was he was having a mare. We get on to he decides to go for another professional, doesn't he? So he goes round to this guy. This is the modern thing, isn't it? This guy, Rory, who had what looked like a factory of football data spreadsheets and stuff. And I just thought, I know about all this. That is work.
Yes.
You might as well be someone working in the accounts department of a bank, and that's a problem.
No, mate. No, you might as well be working in a sweat factory in China, or in the gulags in Stalinist Russia.
I don't think it's that bad, because I don't think that these guys were obviously making money. I don't think they were on minimum wage.
Well, there was one guy, he turned to and he said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm watching Dallas against LA Galaxy. And he was joking, going, that's a tough gig. And I was thinking, well, if you're relentlessly watching, he's not watching the football for enjoyment. He's clicking on players and doing player ratings and all the rest of it.
Well, that's a problem with all this modern internet crap, really, isn't it? They sold the whole thing as freedom and fun, and it ends up like servitude.
Yes.
You're under the cosh of the internet all the time, and these betting factories are the same thing. No, it's no fun just watching football all day and clicking on player stats. Then he got on to what I thought was the actual core of the whole show, which was Joe Isherwood. He didn't give his surname, did he? He was just professional gambler Joe, who is an ex-colleague of ours and a total star in my view, really.
I love Joe. He's a character, and he would probably... It's probably best that he's not in journalism anymore, because the number of libelous suits that would be taken against you would be off the scale, I think.
Yeah, he's found his métier, hasn't he? He used to bet on the horses, and he was pretty good at that.
He was a brilliant judge of form, but it's interesting, as we went on to learn, that if you're absolutely brilliant at something, you find it hard to get a bet on.
Exactly. So Joe started. Let's not beat around the bush here. He's cheating, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's bending the rules as far as he can bend them by doing something called courtsiding, which, let's cut a long story short and say it's basically watching tennis, where the umpire's a bit slow to send the scores through, so you're betting on a foregone conclusion and winning. You can't lose. You know what's happened before the bookmaker does, and that's probably the only surefire way to relentlessly win.
But I love the way Joe, it was very typical Joe, where he's explaining it, and he couldn't just say you're looking for a slow umpire. He'd say, well, you need an old woman with grey hair, sort of, you know.
Old women with grey hair, if I remember, is the sort of thing he likes, isn't it? Anyway, the point is, there's a great quote from an American betting guru called Andrew Bayer, and I think it said something like, at least when you've got a bet on, you know you're alive. And this was the first time, and I've always subscribed to that, it's exciting. And this was the first time in the whole programme where I thought, here's someone who's alive. I mean, he's going around the world trying to find slow umpires, watching tennis in Uganda, and he says keep away from Europe, didn't he? Because there's too many people doing the same thing.
Exactly.
He's beating the system. he's living he might be scruffy and that, but he looks like he's living a pretty decent lifestyle, raking in pretty decent six-figure sum every year.
Well, yeah, but also the interesting thing about Joe was that he's on a personal crusade. And that is to punish the bookmakers.
Yeah, because they used to punish him.
Yeah, and he was, like a lot of people, a really poor gambler who then slipped into casino gambling and was basically doing his nuts.
Yeah, but he's worked out a way to beat them now, and he hates them, and he's getting back. He's taking revenge, and, you know, I don't mean to trivialise the subject, but taking revenge in the bookies to the tune of 6 figures a year is a lot better than giving up and going to Gamblers Anonymous, isn't it? If you can
absolutely.
do it.
I mean, this is why I don't always side with these hand-wringing people, sort of like Sally Army, saying, oh, we've got to stop it, and all the rest of these poor people. I always think, if you're going to gamble, do a bit of homework, and if you lose, get better at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit harsh, but it's true, isn't it? It's just that
basically,
the ones we've seen in the programme who had got better at it, most of them, as we said, had become boring. Whereas Joe is a sort of buccaneer, isn't he? I mean, he's not the sort of buccaneer you'd really want to be confined with on a ship for too long, but he's definitely a buccaneer, if not a pirate.
Or be married to, possibly.
Oh, I wouldn't be marrying Joe Isherwood, no. But the point is, once he got linked up with Lloyd, and they started doing the courtside, and Joe was in Florida, I think, ringing through the scores before they came on the bookies website, and Lloyd was bashing away at the buttons on his laptop, and he was pretty crap.
It was too slow.
Too slow at first, but even being slow, he managed to turn 800 quid into $3,500 more or less in a few minutes by the looks of things. That is beating the bookies, and he did it.
Absolutely.
The only time in the programme where he did it.
And I love the fact about Lloyd as well, is that how he got so into it and was living it, you know, we're on.
Oh, yeah. Apart from where he broke the blinds, didn't he?
He did.
It's typical, that, isn't it? You're trying to beat the bookies and your missus says, can you close the blind, please? And it slows everything down and gets in the way.
I did like
you can buy a new blind after that.
Or employ someone to pull the blinds for you.
Exactly, yeah. He was really sweating like a pig, wasn't he? And he was really excited. And I was amazed they were putting on huge bets, huge for me anyway, like hundreds and hundreds of pounds odds on.
Well, the final one they did was 2,700.
Yeah, and I just thought, no one stopped this? No one going to stop this? But they didn't until the next day, literally the next day. Which just goes to show how appalling the whole thing is, because he got a letter from Bet365, didn't he, saying his account had been restricted immediately. And he tried to put a bet on 1-0 West Ham. Talk about poignant. 1-0 West Ham in some football match, and he said he could have £6 on it.
£6, 6 pence, I think.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, it makes all the difference.
In fairness to Bet365, and I suppose there are other bookmakers we could mention who do the same thing, obviously, is if somebody, which the boys were doing, was if somebody kept putting their hand in your pocket and taking a tenner out, would you let them carry on?
Of course not. I mean, they're in business, aren't they? It's like all these fancy offers they do of inflated prices. They're not going to let you have more than a tenner on it, are they? So there you go, right? He'd beat the bookie, right? But one of the other guys, the only other professional he got linked up with was a guy called Ed, who was a very deadly serious football gambler.
Oh man, I'd have died of boredom after about 15 minutes of watching that guy.
He knew all about the St Johnstone reserves, didn't he? With the first team players, which is great. He's a serious player, but again, it's like work. After the tennis, Joe Isherwood, courtsiding, making a load of money, Lloyd thinks, right, I'm going to bang this up and make my target, which is a bad thing with betting. You shouldn't have a target. You should just have a good bet, shouldn't you?
Well, exactly.
Having a target is just the road to madness. And he's decided to hit his target, right? Doubling his $7,500. So he thinks, I'll take 2 of Ed's football bets.
And what does he do? What does the gut truster do?
Stuck in another of his own, didn't he? Can't get rid of the gut truster personality, can he? And he didn't even...
He didn't even get the bet right off Ed.
No, he didn't put one of the bets on right. So he didn't win any of them. And then I thought, he was going, actually, I've made my $7,500 into 9.5 in 4 weeks. I thought, it sounds good, but it's not that much. 500 quid a week, minus whatever expenses you've got.
Exactly.
It's not a fortune, is it?
And let's be frank, like Jordan, if you are a pro gambler, you're going to go a period where you lose. And you haven't got your pension being paid into, you haven't got sick pay, and that's basically your rent and your food.
Yeah, your $7,500 just ain't going to last very long.
I'd be crawling up the walls, you know.
Well, he went down in flames on those bets, didn't he? They all lost. It was a complete disaster. And yet again, having been excited when he won, he was very, entertaining is the wrong word, but he was very convincing when he lost. He was absolutely gutted, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was brilliant. I loved it, because if you've had a bet, you know exactly what he's going through.
And just in case people think we're being irresponsible here, just promoting mad gambling, which we're not.
Which I quite enjoy, actually.
The show, yes, but the show really, and a lot of the commentary on it has been as such, was really about addiction and how it's fed by the bookies and their advertising. But before we get on to that, let's just stop there and do our own ads, which unfortunately don't seem to be very addictive. But just to say, if you like the podcasts, listen to them on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel on there. You can listen to us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and who knows where else really. And there's a website, modernmediareview.com, and we're on Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff.
Well, just on this podcasting thing, I was thinking, a lot of the time feels like you're whistling in the wind, but
does it?
Lloyd being a comedian, you're going to the Fringe next week, aren't you? I mean, how big is the number of acts on there?
There's about 5 million comedy shows. I know I browsed it last night. Just reading it was exhausting. Just reading the list was exhausting.
So no wonder Lloyd is trying to sort of beat the bookies, because it must be worse trying to beat the comedians, because there's millions of them.
Almost impossible, I'd say. I was shocked by how many there are. Probably more stand-ups at the Edinburgh Fringe than there are podcasts on Apple Podcasts.
Extraordinary. But yeah, the serious point to Can You Beat the Bookies was a lot of angst and worry about, especially because of easy access, was the rise in the number of teenage gambling addicts. And as he showed us, he got an account up and running within 2 minutes, and then Joe was talking about how he was buying accounts from students, and he said he said during a bad period I lost 20 grand on a student's account, he said. Now that didn't raise any issues, he said, and yet me winning would be an issue.
Quite happy for a few thousand students to run up 5-figure losses. They're meant to be responsible, and but Lloyd should know this. He was the gut buster. Sorry, the gut truster.
He is the gut buster.
I never get these clever plays on words right. And he talked to this geezer, didn't he? He was a professor.
Yeah.
Of gambling or something, which...
Dr. Philip Newell, who was an ex-poker player.
But it did give me a sense of that old thing where you think the coppers look a bit young these days, don't it? Because
well, he looked about 15.
15-year-old professor of gambling.
Wearing a parka with a top knot. Now, no self-respecting man wears a top knot, do they?
Well, not professors, I wouldn't have thought. Anyway, he'd bought his house with cash, so he must have been doing something right.
That was pretty impressive, I've got to say.
But as he pointed out, that ad that Lloyd was in, where he was the gut truster, they loved that. And in that ad, they had the professor, didn't they? Who was meant to be really boring because he did all the stats and worked it all out. It was like, we don't want to be like the professor.
Well, the professor was boring because, he was like these guys sitting in a bunker with their football data. And also, he might win.
Yeah, he might win. That's the problem. I was just wondering, is it any different to the way the bookies used to do their advertising come-ons? And I thought, yeah, it is, because I remember years and years ago, well, before online betting, really, William Hill used to do a thing at Royal Ascot where they had the Yankee Challenge. It was a bet with 4 horses, and the best odds winning Yankee of the week would win 25 grand or something.
Didn't you do that?
Well, I did it every day in those days, and I was national leader for one day. And I went into the shop and I said, it was on the board, national leader, this branch. And I went, is that me? And the bloke went, yeah, but don't worry, son, you won't be winning on Friday. And he was right. Someone else got a better one the next day. But that all seems so innocent, really, doesn't it?
Well, don't forget, it was also quite difficult to get into a bookmaker's. Because you had to be obviously over 18. Yeah. And it was full of sort of like, a lot of guys which you wouldn't go to the pub with.
Oh, man, when you came out of there, you used to stink, didn't you?
Basically. And there were no women in there, which is this new thing with online, is that it allows...
There were in Brixton, mate.
Was there?
Well, there were all sorts of business going on in the William Hill shop in Cold Harbour Lane.
Well, it wasn't the same in Epsom, but it was still you'd come out there smelling like you had 1,000 a day habit.
Yeah, or a drug habit in the Brixton one.
But the point is that it's the access to it. So you've got your bingo, you've got your casino games, and it's anonymous. You don't have to feel that people are looking at you or seeing how much money you're putting on. And it's all much easier. That's the main point about it, really.
Yeah, and then he went and interviewed a salutary example of this, which was another comedian.
Well, it's a mate of his, which was very brave.
Brave of them both, really, who'd got himself into some problems gambling, and actually said that this was a while ago, and he'd been at Gamblers Anonymous and all that, and said, they got younger and younger in there. And he also said that if he was 18 now, with all the access you've got online and with apps and things like that, he'd probably be dead because he'd have killed himself. Pretty grim.
It was grim.
And kudos to the show, because they didn't leave this till the end, like us. They stuck it in before halfway through.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it made you realise how grim it is and how ineffectual the bookies' stupid ads that they carry reluctantly saying, when the fun stop.
Yeah.
With, as people have pointed out, not least you, the word fun
massive
in huge letters and stop in very small letters. So in the end, that's what the programme was about to me. Not about how to beat the bookies, but the fact that you're very unlikely to beat the bookies, and if you do, you're probably cheating, and and they'll stop you.
Or you're doing a 75-hour week, getting no the only suntan you're getting is off your computer, and it's not any fun. The whole fun about gambling is that it's to try and make a little bit of money, and anyone who thinks they can make any serious money without just turning it into a drudgery life of hard work is kidding themselves.
The thing is, the first time you have a winning bet, you don't think, in a few years I'll be able to report a cabin full of blokes with spreadsheets working out the stats on South American football, do you? Or Korean volleyball?
Not massively, no.
We know people, don't we, who suddenly thought they couldn't go to the racetrack anymore because they had to be in front of the computer.
That's right, yeah. I mean,
where's the fun in that?
Well, it's no fun. And the whole idea about money for nothing is it's money for nothing. No effort.
Unless you're Wayne Rooney.
Well, that is money for nothing.
He seems to be about to get money for nothing. I do like Wayne. I think he's a genuine...
Well, he's got himself into a little bit of hot water, not because he signed for Derby County and coming back to England when some people are saying maybe his best years behind him, but Derby is sponsored by, like a lot of football teams now, a betting company called 32 Red, and Wayne is going to...
He's going to play as number 32, isn't he?
He is, yeah, which... Like we were chatting earlier, you said, well, good luck to him. And I sort of agree, really, because why not wear 32? Does it mean that there's going to be 7-year-old children logging on to 32 Red and running up, losing their parents' house?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Well, maybe then I'm going to be with the hand wringers and say Wayne should be banned from wearing 32.
There's too much just hand-wringing around me. I mean, me, I'm PC plod, but... This stuff, it's like, come on, people have to have some... You got to, yes, by all means, do the things that they're meant to do, which they don't do, which is help people who seem to have a problem and exclude people who've got a problem and provide support for people with problem. But they don't do any of that, do they? There's tons of evidence that says they just don't bother. They just let people rack up the debts. But on the other hand...
Well, weren't they supposed to put 0.001% of, I can't remember if it was net profit or turnover, into addiction counselling?
Yeah, but they don't. It's just all lip service, Sean. That's the point. Now, all I'm saying is there's got to be balance between that and allowing people to bet if they want to bet. I keep getting the feeling that somehow it's becoming perceived as some kind of antisocial activity. And it's not.
Well, the trouble is that I seem to like most antisocial activities. It's the same thing with going to the pub.
Well, you want to get down the William Hill shop in Cold Harbour Lane, mate. You won't be short of antisocial activities there. Actually, I think it's an estate agent now. It's all been gentrified.
Well, it's probably that or a charity shop because, as we've discussed before, there isn't much left on the high street apart from bookies, charity shops and pound shops.
You haven't been down to Brixton recently, have you? It's not...
Well, you've gone all gentrified, mate, down there, eating your samphire and quinoa sandwiches.
At the end of it, I think there was a good conclusion, and I think we can draw the same conclusion. If you go back to my quote from Andrew Byer, at least when you've got a bet on, you're alive. Most of what Lloyd showed us just isn't going to make you feel very good, is it?
Well, I'll just put that against you. I was working last night and I was covering Sandown and someone phoned me from the racetrack and considering we were doing this podcast this morning, I then tipped them a horse I thought was going to win. And lucky enough, it did win. And I was buzzing. They phoned up buzzing. It was only for a £5. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there you are. You can beat the bookies.
You can beat the bookies.
When they're not beating you.
Well,
and
exactly.
on that note, I think the racing's going to start soon, Sean, so
we
better call a halt here and say thanks very much for listening. Go out and try and beat the bookies.
Or not.
But don't get into too much trouble doing it.
Just don't lose the house trying to beat the bookies.
Don't lose your house.
No.
And we'll be back soon with something much more.
Yeah, what are we going to do? We're going to do Cummings.
We'll be back soon with something much less controversial. Dominic Cummings. Or is he more controversial?
More controversial.
I bet you he's worked out some ways to beat the bookies.
Well, I think he's beating the country with a big stick, isn't he?
We'll be talking about him.
Yeah, we will.
And his website.
And on that note,
thinking about his pernicious influence in the country. Much worse than major bookmakers, I'd say. We're about to find out. We'll say good night and thanks very much and see you soon. Bye.
Cheers.